Have you ever stopped to think that your audience may be reading more from your posture than your PowerPoint? Every gesture, stance, and micro expression tells a story, sometimes louder than your words ever could. And on today's show, we'll be talking about your body language as a presenter. It can help you connect deeper or push the audience the other way. You ready? Let's go. Today's guest, Martin Brooks, has been a communications coach for over 23 years, helping executives to present better. He specializes in how people can use their body language to create an even greater impact with their audience. And he's the author of the critically acclaimed Body Language Decoder, published in 2021. I'm going to let him take it from here because he'll do a better job of telling you his journey than I will. Let's see what he can do with two and a half minutes. Welcome to the show, Martin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak not only to you, but also to your fantastic listeners who must all be eager to know, how do I become a better presenter? So let me tell you a little bit about myself. As you mentioned in your introduction, I have been a communications consultant for over 23 years, started back in 2002. And back in those days, I was a classic, what we call soft skills trainer. So looking at sales, presentation, leadership. And I've always been fascinated in what is it that people who are best at that, how do they create that result? And around that time, 2002, I was on a course on psychology, and one of the lecturers said this phrase that looking back on it now, as Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. He said this question. The question was, what's the difference that makes the difference? What's the difference that makes a difference? So what does a brilliant presenter do that an average one doesn't? What do they do more often better? Or what do they not do? What, as you said in your introduction, what maybe takes away from a person's potential impact? And I was fascinated in that. And over the years, I've become more and more fascinated, done more and more research into the difference that body language makes and how to be able to help people do that. So I use body language to help people communicate and convince, influence, and motivate their audience even better. How? By communicating with greater credibility, with greater confidence, and yes, even greater charisma. The kind of work I do is I work in three different ways. I deliver keynotes to large audiences, giving them some key tips, some key things that you can do differently. Over a longer period of time, I'll offer courses to senior executives. It used to be a half day a day. We get a chance to dive into some more of the tools and context, and also give them the opportunity to try things, get critiqued, and move forward. And getting critiqued is something that is really important in my one-to-one coaching that I do with senior executives, focusing on what they're doing, what they could do differently, how they could do it better. But for me, one of the things that makes me different is the body language is not just an observational thing. Yes, it's fascinating, but what I want people to get from interacting with me is how they can use their body language difference. How can they just make those little differences in their gesture, their facial expressions, their posture, in order to connect, convince, and really communicate with much more power with their audience. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you focused all about that here on the Presentation Whisperer.
Oh man, it was perfect. Perfect. You know what? My audience behind me is really loving that one. Well done. Well done. Folks, I was timing them. There was a clock on for those who were walking the dog and sitting in the car. There's a clock on the screen. This man just nailed it perfectly. Right. I would say right to the second. But you know what? Most professional speakers can do that. If I told Martin 20 seconds before we started, Martin, I'm going to give you 4 minutes, he'd be in at 3:59. If I gave him a minute, he'd be in at 59 seconds. But that's what we do. Anyway, well done. I can tell you've been on stage a few times. Let's get. It's funny when I look at speaking. and nonverbals, there's a lot of skeptics out there. And I
Mm,
think the elephant in the room is evidence. So,
yeah.
what evidence can you show that better body language has a measurable difference on how audience connects with a presenter?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. And in fact, prior to a few years ago, a question I actually struggle to audiences, particularly if I'm going to big corporates and I'm going, hey, invest in this training, invest in this coaching, have me as a keynote speaker. And of course, a business, it all comes down to that bottom line. Where's the ROI on an investment? But prior to having this piece of evidence that I'm about to talk about, I would use what was referred to as anecdotal evidence. Look at these great speakers. Look at all the consistencies. You can see the same behaviors. And of course, I had to deal with the pushback. Well, isn't that your personal bias? You're seeing what you want to see. Where's the hard and fast scientific evidence? So I was beside myself with delight when I saw an article published in the Harvard Business Review back in 2019 on what another person had been very curious about what difference does body language make? Dr. Joep Cornelissen of Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And he had done an experiment where he had given presenters a script. He said, here is your script. You're pitching this new product or idea to potential investors. Those potential investors coming into the university thought they were attending a genuine pitch for investment. That's where they were coming from. Here's these students talking about this fantastic thing coming out of the fresh from the university. It's going to be the next big thing. And they had a script. And one group was told, okay, so just say it the way you would normally say it, deliver it in the way that you would, like keep your body language kind of muted. Don't, like be too enthusiastic with your facial expressions, your hands, your posture, your energy. Just, kind of deliver it, cool, calm, and collected. Then they went to a separate group and said, right, same script, exactly the same script, but go for it with your body language. Now, they weren't students, they were actually actors. So they weren't just like waving their hands around. They knew how to make a dramatic effect. And it's a big opportunity for a small investment, how to use their body language much more effectively. Then they went back to the investors and they tracked how likely are you to invest in this product that you've seen pitched. And when they compared the results to the group with the muted body language to the group with the more expressive body language, investors were, drumroll, 12% more likely to invest. 12% more likely to invest. And that figure is just so demonstrative of the impact it makes. And my background was sales and sales leadership. And if somebody came along to me as a sales leader and said, I could give you an extra 3% conversion. If you get your sales teams to do this, they'll convert 3% better. I would have bitten their hand off. 3%, 5%, 10%, 12%. 12%, I would have sold my house on the spot and given it to them and go, what can I do to get my team to be able to convert at 12%, a 12% more interest in what they're saying? So that's what's at stake. That's the ROI of using better body language and creates my tagline now. Better body language is better business. It just helps move things along.
Yeah. And what you just did was you took something from a feeling and moved it to a fact. That's what I like.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Are facial expressions considered body language?
Yeah, so basically anything that you can see. So it can be gesture, posture, facial expressions, all of the above, actions that you would take. And facial expressions are really important, particularly for building relationships and empathy and connection. Because if you're a whole segment I'm doing a lot more these days is about how do you build effective relationships with your body language, not just communicating externally when you got something to say, but when somebody's communicating to you, how can you use it to leverage building the relationship and how we do key quality listening. And one of the tips, fantastically, is one of the things you're almost doing right now. We call the mouth cover. So just covering your mouth and going, okay, because this is inconsistent with talking. We don't talk with our hands over our mouth. This is more of a listen. Oh, tell me more. We listen. And then again, what you're doing now, active listening, you're nodding. You go, well, that's a good point. I
I can't
understand
get one by him. I got to tell you,
that.
I'm actually going arms down, stay still.
Don't
And
do
Martin's
it.
picking me apart, but keep
Uh,
going.
but the other thing then is that to really demonstrate that you're getting the feeling that somebody is putting across. So if they're talking about something, this was really stressful, and you have a neutral face, part of their brain will go, are they really getting it? Are they really connecting it? Because I don't see evidence of it. And let's remind ourselves, human beings, our primary instinct, our primary methodology of reading the world literally is what we can see. Our primary sense is our sight. So if somebody's got a more neutral face and they're talking about something that's very stressful, very exciting, or really interesting, and we've got a more blank facial expression, then it's very difficult for them to go, wow, this person is really listening and paying attention, because what we want to see evidence of is the same experience of emotion. So if you said to me, if I said to you, you said to me, it's a really exciting opportunity, and I go, yeah, I can see that's a really exciting opportunity. Your brain's going to go, no, I mean, you may have intellectually got it, but you don't get it here. You don't get that feeling in your heart or in your gut. So being able to express that emotion through facial expressions, which is where we produce those, mirror those emotions, we go, that's so exciting. I'm so happy for you. Or you must have been really worried and concerned about that. I get that. And that takes communication in terms of the empathy and listening and demonstrating that emotion back to the other person, that you're not just listening to the words that they're saying, but going beyond the words to the emotion. And that's where we build relationships. That's where we build empathy, and that's where we build trust. And facial expressions are crucial for that.
I'm glad you said that. I used to, when I was teaching train the trainer, and I'd love to tell you the source for this. Maybe you can, but I remember this study that was done on the emotional impact of our message, just the emotion, what we felt in our heart. And they broke it down to words, nonverbal cues, which was everything but facial expressions, because they felt that facial expressions were strong enough to sort of stand on its own. And the
Oh,
study
wow. Okay.
certainly supported that, because they said emotionally, what we really feel in our gut. If I'm selling, if I'm parenting, I really want people to believe what I'm saying. 7% due to words, 38% due to nonverbal cues, 55% due to facial expressions. Imagine just putting the nonverbal cues and the facial expressions together, but what we feel in our gut and our heart is really carried by those nonverbals.
Yeah, sure. I mean, unfortunately, I'm going to
You're going to poke a hole in that one?
I'm going to put. No, I'm not going to poke on. I'm going to blow it up. So that is the was known as the Moravian myth. And nobody would want that to be more true than me, to be able to go to a corporation and say, hey, 50% of your sales team's success lies with their body language, and I'm the guy to do it. So it was quoted in 1967 Journal of Psychology by a gentleman called Albert Moravian. And he is known as the Moravian myth. And it is absolutely, and I'm going to use inverted commas here, nonsense. Not because I said that, that's Moravian himself. There was one piece of research that was quoted out of context. There was a very small sample number. And my understanding is that that piece of research was if you have a feeling that the person is not being truthful to you, what will you pay more attention to? Their words, their tone of voice, or their body language? And of course, if you don't believe the words, that's where they come out at 7. The tone of voice, or the emotion that comes in the voice, being 38, and then of course the body language 55. But I'm afraid that's known as the Moravian myth. And to quote the person whose research it is absolute nonsense.
Nonsense.
That's
Well,
not what that piece of research meant.
yeah, that's the last time I share a number with you. But but that's the beauty of what I want on this show. There are some old numbers, like how many times, Martin, people throw, I know, I've heard that speaking in public is the number one fear over drowning and death. And it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, that was kicked around in the 50s and 60s. That's been blown up too. That's just not, I mean, people get cozy with those numbers, but it's not really true anymore. But I'm glad you took that one, because I forgot as soon as you mentioned his name. It's like, oh yeah, because we sourced it at Xerox. But I'm glad that we're cleaning some of that up. That's important to me. So thanks. Although I wasn't pleased with the nonsense column, the comment, I was okay with the rest of it. Now, like I said, I'm
Quote
staying away from
Moravian
numbers with
himself
Martin.
on that one.
Yeah. What are my nonverbals saying now, Martin? Okay.
Surprise.
Surprise. Well, here's a surprise for you. I was looking through your book. It's a
Mm.
really good book, by the way. I hope people get that, and please throw a comment up there when you do a review. It really matters to the authors. But you said that our bodies are quote unquote broadcasting messages even when we're silent.
Mm.
What kind of messages are people sending without even realizing it?
Yeah, I mean, this is fantastic. I'm actually currently commissioned by a newspaper here in the UK. There's a famous program going on called Traitors, where
Oh yeah,
it's like a game show, and like you got three traitors, and they're trying to pretend they're not traitors, and the faithful, who are everybody else, trying to figure out who's the traitor in our midst. And one of the things that's really important there is because they have to lie, don't they? They have to pretend that they're not the traitors. And one of the things that I've really picked up on is something, for example, I refer to in Body Language Decoder as truth slips, where the body language leaks the truth whilst the person is trying to communicate something that's not the case. So one of the things I picked out on that particular program recently in the review was somebody was being accused of something, and they had a truth slip. So they said, "Is this the case for you?" And the person was kind of nodded. Just they actually had a little nod. There was a little yes, I am a traitor in there. Now, what was fascinating to me about that was that none of the people actually noticed it. They didn't notice that he answered the question non-verbally, even though he was silent whilst that particular accusation was being made. So the old adage of the body speaks the mind, the truth will come out, whether it's in that case there was no vocalization that went with it. The person, are you a traitor? And he kind of went, hmm. And he just nodded in that first instance before he said anything, and then denied it. And another faithful at that point in time, that same round table where they're all accusing each other, he said he had another truth slip where he said, I don't know what's going on. I really don't know what's going on. And then just nodded, yes, I do know what's going on. So the denial was there, but then there was that little slip. The truth came out in terms of the body language. So even if in the first example, he wasn't saying anything, he wasn't actively communicating, but your body language is always saying, I always say to my clients, your body language is always commuting a message. My challenge is a communicating the right message to be consistent with your overall outcome.
got it. Martin, I want to drop back for a second. And then I want to, my question on deck is I think we underestimate this, what you're saying there, and I want you to backfill me. But when you blew up that number on me that you referred
Mm,
to as nonsense, thanks again for that. Uh, did I still think it's more important, because I remember even as a kid, it wasn't what you said, it's how you said it. So let's
mm,
blow up that number, but let's not bury the lead. Are
mm.
there numbers that support that we better be watching those nonverbals, even if they're not quite as dramatic as the ones I shared?
Yeah, well, I think the reality is, how would you accurately assess what a human being is being subjected to? How could you differentiate what the impact is of the words that the people are saying, how they sound, and that body language? And what I always say is, it's a complete variable. It's almost impossible to measure,
Hmm.
but at certain points in time, you could say that body language is like 95%, particularly towards the start, where there's that first impression, how a person walks into a room. Are they looking at the floor? Are they looking down? Are they fidgeting? Are their shoulders rounded? Because human beings, we have that fight or flight instinct that's still in there, and we still make those instant judgments about people. Is this person, and is this person confident? Are they credible? Are they going to believe what do I believe what they are saying? Particularly when we don't know people, that the physicality of that first impression is really, really important. Beyond that, then there's this what a principle I call alignment. How aligned is your body language with what you're saying? So if you were to say to somebody, I really believe this, and you're shaking your head no, then your brain goes, well, hang on a second. It sounded good. Those are the words that I wanted to hear, but there wasn't that alignment in the body language. It wasn't all consistent. So it is still crucially important. And I would love to be able to identify in somebody's brain what are they really paying attention to. And the truth is that there are certain times where words are going to be most important thing. The sound of your voice is going to be the most important thing, or your body language is going to be the most important thing. And it will vary like waves. It'll go up and down depending upon what we're paying attention to. The crucial thing is that you can't be a quality communicator without really good results on all of those topics. If one of those is low, if you're using, for example, weaker language, oh, I hope we can, we're going to try to do that, maybe, that doesn't instill somebody with confidence. If you have a good, confident sounding voice, and then somebody says to you, how could you be sure of that? Oh, we can be very sure. And your pitch goes up. Again, that becomes the focal point in that time because there's a lack of consistency in terms of how credible your voice was. Or if you're looking somebody in the eye, you got good levels of eye contact around the whole conversation, the whole presentation, and then you get a tricky question and you start looking away or looking down. Again, now the body language becomes the most important thing. So there has to be consistency in that communication across all of those mediums, and they all have to back each other up. So you got to look right when you're saying. So you can't say we're happy and frown. You got to say we're really happy. You can't say we're really happy with the flat voice. We're really happy. Well, I don't think you are. Or we're kind of happy. Well, that doesn't really get across the power from the words. So it's difficult to, I think I'll conclude by saying it's difficult to be able to break them down individually. But if you want to be a really good presenter, you're going to be really good at all of those. And body language is one of those that can absolutely scupper a key presentation if you're not communicating in line with what that audience would expect, want, or need.
Right. Well, Martin, I'm going to allow you to quote the Jolles study now because I actually performed a study while I was at Xerox. And I'll tell you how I did it. I took one group out because I didn't want them to watch the exercise and get a head start because I was going to run it twice. The first time I ran it, I had two people, I had groups of two back to back assembling triangles, a diagram. One person had a diagram on one side, the other was to assemble it on the other, but they couldn't see each other. And there was no talking back and forth. For you trainers out there, what I was trying to really simulate was how we watch and read the facial expressions of our audience. In a keynote, we're kind of blasting, but in a training session, we got a smaller group. We can really watch and see how what we're saying, whether it's resonating. In any case, they built their triangle diagram, timed, etc. Then I brought the other group in, set the same exact experiment, but this time I let them see each other, but I put a box over top of the triangles. So the trainer couldn't see what was being assembled. Same thing, the person couldn't speak, but they naturally started making sort of frowns and questions, and their face, you could tell when they were a little bit lost this time. And so the other person was responding, here, let me do that again. Here, wait a minute, let's start from the second one. And of course, they assembled it much more effectively, just being able to visually see those nonverbals. So that was the Jolles
Mm,
experiment. You may use that in
mm.
your studies.
Thank you. And you're right, because what's really important there is that there's not an assumption that you know what I've meant
Mm.
or that the communication was clear. There's always that but really important element of doubt. Was I clear? Did it make sense? Are they getting it? Because once you take ego out, oh, I'm this amazing communicator and everything I say is clear. We take that ego out and you go, well, I know there are so many uh, issues and lost the phrase lost in translation, all of that. So really good communicators, really good presenters are making their message as clear as they can, and they're also paying attention to how it lands. So one of the sections that I cover in some of my keynotes is how to read your audience, and more importantly, how to adjust and what you should be looking at. Because very often, as you rightly said, keynote speakers is 500 people in the room, and they tend to, right, I've got a blast, and they're not really paying enough attention to the people that are in front of them. That's even more important with a smaller group and crucial on a one-to-one. But I think it's definitely consistent among all three environments to make sure that what you're saying is making sense, it's landing, and where do you need to stop, double check, ask a question, clarify, based on that non-verbal feedback that you're getting? Are you getting people kind of going like that, or looking at the person next to them and go, "Did you hear what I just heard? Because that kind of didn't make sense." And picking up on those and being able to clarify, because the best communicators in the world will get their message garbled, or an audience's personal bias may well change it. So always looking out for those signals and adjusting as we go is a really important skill to have.
Perfect. And one of the other messages that we make to trainers is this is why we do icebreakers. This is why we go easy with our questions early. We no matter what the response is, we try and build confidence in the audience so they're comfortable enough to put their hand up if they're lost.
Yeah.
But if you haven't broken that wall down yet, you're at the mercy of those facial expressions. That'll help. I prefer a room that feels comfortable enough to say, "Stop, I'm lost." But you got to
Yeah.
earn that as a trainer. People don't just come in with that. That could potentially be embarrassing to an individual. So we have to create a safe space for that. All right, let's jump to the trainers a little bit and to the speakers. Give me some common body language mistakes that a leader or a presenter would make that would quietly kind of weaken the authority that they're establishing or the message they're sending.
Yeah. Well, let's start right at the start. When is an audience deciding whether a person is worthwhile listening to or not? And that's that, that literally that opening, the first kind of things that you say or do. Some people would say, oh, it's how they walk on stage or stuff before that. But let's just go for that opening piece, because the thing that I always say to people is you have to make a good enough impact at the start. You got to shake the audience up a little so they put their phones down. So they go, oh, okay, well, what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're sharing now is more interesting than what's going on my phone. So it's like, can you really grab their attention? And what people are also paying attention is whether they believe you are credible enough. Do you deserve my attention? And one tip that I've shared with speakers and presenters and trainers is that I see a lot of the time where they kind of ruin that, where we do what I call a postural retreat. So they're standing still, they're looking at their audience, they're going through their heads, they haven't started speaking yet, and then there's that moment where they come up, they make eye contact with their audience, and they go, "Hello, good morning," whatever their opening is. But as they move from that transition from an internal dialogue inside their head and then going outside and going to the audience, there's a little bit of a shock, a little bit of a realization, a little bit of a and what they do in that moment, it's almost like an inbuilt danger response. They take a little half step back. They do what I call a postural retreat, because it's like, oh, all of a sudden there's this danger, there's a performance anxiety. Here I am in front of all of these senior people, and they take a little half step back. So that first sense that the audience get when they're being addressed, why is this person moving away from me? So a little trick that I share with people is a little bit of reverse psychology. So if your average speaker will either stand still or take a little half step back, what I teach people to do is when you open, just take a little half step forward and smile and go, well, good morning. And that's the reverse of what they expect. It's a differentiation. And only speakers who actually been taught this will actually do it. Most will either stand still, which is kind of neutral. The ones who are a little bit nervous, not necessarily aware of their body language, will step back. But the advanced ones will just take that little half step forward towards their audience and have a broad, natural smile, which says, "I'm happy to be here with you." Really communicating that credibility. And if you can throw in a good, confident hand gesture, then you've got a postural advance, a warm smile, and a good, powerful, confident hand gesture to go along with it. Then the audience's brain goes, "Yep, this person's worth paying attention to. You've got me." And now, of course, you've got 10 seconds or 15 seconds to grab their attention now that first physical impression from our primary sensor sight is saying, "Yeah, so far, so good. Now, what have you got?"
Right. Well, I'm telling you, I'm taking notes on this because I think sometimes, another book I won't write, Martin. Maybe we can write this one together. Instinct versus logic. There's so many
Mm,
things that we do that feel very comfortable instinctively. They're completely not logical. And we could start out of our industry and just talk about, buying stocks. You want to buy low and sell high. I'm still trying to find the first person that does that, but okay, because that's not our instinct. That's just
yeah.
logical.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things we do, and that step back to me is probably more instinctive than moving towards the audience. So there are
Yeah.
things like that that are really important that you're covering, and I appreciate it. I truly do. Uh, all right, you coach people on, I'll call them the three C's, on confidence, credibility, and charisma. You're not going to like this question, but they're
Mm.
all important. But
Mm.
of the three, in terms of body language, what do you think is the most important one, and how can we project that? And I'm not discounting the other two, but let's just get at the big one.
Yeah, it kind of depends upon the situation because if it's like a keynote in front of a couple of hundred people, then I would say confidence is more important there first because, most people do feel some performance anxiety about talking to a larger audience. It comes in there, even when I do it, it's like, oh gosh, better have your game face on today. This is a different environment, talking one-to-one online or a small group. So I think in that context, in a keynote, in a large audience, then is that confidence first, followed quickly by that credibility. Now, if it's an internal team, if you're presenting to the board and they know you, then I would say well, credibility is probably more important there and how you communicate that first of all, particularly if you're known as a good presenter or a senior executive, you always bring things to the table. Then credibility is probably going to be more important there, particularly if you're talking about something in the future. So very often senior leaders they're pitching for resources. We want to be able to do this, and then it's like, well, hang on, this is educated guesswork because you can measure what's happened in the past, but you want money for something that's going to happen in the
Hmm.
future. So I really need to get that sense of credibility that there's some research behind this, that you've done the figures, that the projections that you're making are much more likely to be accurate. So I want to see some credibility first, and then have confidence perhaps when you take those questions. Whereas if you were a sales team pitching to a new customer, you might say, well, actually, charisma is more important here because we want to have that working relationship. We want to feel somebody who's really passionate about their product, their service. We want to be able to buy into that. And the only way we can get passionate or energetic about a service if the person who's selling it looks like they really value and have that high energy on it. So I think, all three of those really important. And I think in terms of where they sit in terms of priority, it very much depends upon the context. But I love the fact that you asked that question because that indicates, which do I do first? Where should the focus be? So I love that curiosity that's coming through with that question, which is a great
Good.
one.
Appreciate it. It wasn't nonsense. It was a legitimate question.
A legitimate good question.
Back to you. I was working with a consultant, and he was on me a little bit about my picture, my headshot, which isn't
Mm,
really a big smiley, teethy picture. I have no problem with my teeth. It's just I like that confidence look. And so
yeah.
he said, so we had this little bet going. He said, well, I think you should have a big smile. And I said, he said, there's a website. I don't remember the name of it where you can put up a picture and it farms it out to about 100 people and they will
Mm,
score it on multiple things. And it's funny, the smiley one got kind of the charisma votes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like a nice guy. The
Mm,
it's not frowning, but it's just kind of really looking right at you. That one got the confidence. That one got I think this guy can do the job. And I said, I'm still picking. I want people to
mm,
love me like everyone else.
yeah.
But I'm going to pick he's capable of doing this job picture. So that was another little experiment that can be done with photos.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so generally speaking, if you talk about likability, we want to see
Right.
warmth.
Right.
Yeah, we want to see warmth. We want to see that, oh, this is a person who we could work with. But again, if you're hiring somebody, we want somebody to kick ass, then warmth perhaps isn't that key driver of what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody probably who's got a more of a serious face on, a game face. We're going to get
Right.
things done here. So again, there's a little bit of context there in terms of what's the intended outcome, who's the audience, what are they looking for, and then tailoring and shifting a little bit towards that to be able to hit those KPIs that they're looking for, because not everybody has the same
Right.
KPIs.
Right. No, I had one of the books that I wrote. It was a book called "Why People Don't Believe You." And I don't like talking about my books because I got a guest on here. I want to talk about his book, but I'm only bringing it up because that's such a weird title. Well, what's the cover going to look like? And so I had a vision of this, and it was this picture. Took about 100 pictures for the photographer to get it because I said I don't want to be happy and say that why people aren't believing you. I don't want to scare people and say that. I got to find the expression that says we got this. You're in
Mm,
good hands. And
mm.
boy, did I get a lesson in nonverbals because it took a while to go to a mirror and kind of figure it out. It's still kind of all over. But when we got it, we got it. In other words, I went, well, there it is, and we all could see
That's the
it.
one. That's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's the one. But it's hard. Now think about being up there as a speaker and you're just rolling. We just have to watch these things. But anyway,
Mm.
that was a tough one for me, Martin. You and your nonverbals. How does body language play out differently in virtual programs, meetings versus in person?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a really important one. And again, I find in my keynotes, this is something that we get asked for because, post COVID, there's still a large percentage of stuff now is done online. And that's just the reality. The world has shifted, the world has changed. It was probably gently moving towards where we are now, but then obviously, of course, the COVID and having to deal with everything remotely just fast forwarded everything probably about somewhere between 5 to 10 years, I would imagine. It's like we're doing this now because we don't have a choice, as opposed to wouldn't it be good if we? So the reality then is that whilst the technology and whilst the expectations have changed, what hasn't changed? How human beings connect. That is a much slower evolving thing. And there's an argument there. You know what? We actually still need the same things. The old idea of look me in the eye and tell me that, or the salesperson who won the deal was the one who actually got in a plane, got on a train, got in a car, and went to see that customer and literally pressed flesh with them, shook their hand, and said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm making my eyes available for you to look in so you can get that better feeling of trust, get that better feeling of empathy, get that better feeling of where this relationship could go in the future." So you've got this technological change, but it's going really fast, but you still got some human needs. So how do we bridge the gap between those two is very often a lot of my clients actually looking for. Some of them don't like the first one. And the first one is cameras on. A lot of people go, "Oh, we don't want we have a cameras. We have a rule where people aren't feeling comfortable, or if they're in there, they haven't, managed to get out of their pajamas yet, or whatever." And it's like, well, I'm sorry, my rule, and I learned this in COVID. Whereas I now have a rule. It's like, well, if you want to book me to do a virtual keynote, I need to see people's faces. The cameras need to be on. That's one of my conditions. Because during COVID, I remember doing a virtual presentation, and it was a whole screen of black rectangles, and it was just like I could hear it in my own voice. I could hear my has the signal gone? Can they still hear me? Is this landing? Is this relevant to the agenda that they wanted? Has that point that I said there landed as well as I thought it would? Because if that one doesn't land, then the next one's not going to land because the second one was almost like built upon the first one. And just all these questions in my head because I had no validation of that. And it really impacted upon me as a speaker, and I could feel my performance was dropping. And even during the meeting, I was going, "I'm not doing this again. I am just not doing this again because I'm not performing at my best." But also, what are people on the other end doing? If they know their camera off, if they know they can't be seen, well, they're well, I'll just check this because the person I'm speaking to can't see me. And there's a complete disconnect then on both sides. So one of the first rules is cameras on. Second rule is that yes, body language is still important, even though as much of it is not available to us. So what I call the reference I call shoulder high gestures, because when we normally gesture, we gesture down here. Now, as you can see, if I'm gesturing where I normally gesturing, I'm making fantastic gestures, none of which you can see. So we have to get used to gesturing up here, shoulder high gestures. We take things from here, they go to there, and there's that journey. So now the eyes can be visually engaged because we get bored if there isn't something visually that's catching our eye. We are natural predators. Our eyes point forward. We are drawn to movement. So if nothing moves, if I drop my hands and my head is just there and it's available and I'm not nodding or really being overly expressive in my body language, now if something in your peripheral vision is moving more than me, your eyes are automatically going to go to it. Yes, it's that hunter. Oh, prey has just moved. What's that? You know, so this visual engagement is really, really important. But we want to make sure that we've got a good setup for it as well. So the third thing is about your setup. So you want to have your camera at eye height because you talk to people, looking them in the eye. You don't want to be, looking down on them, and you certainly don't want to be looking up somebody's nose, but also far enough away from the screen whereby you're not really here. And it's kind of hard to fit the hands in. So having a headset with a nice long lead that you can be at a distance where you're far enough away so that all kind of fits. But what people have who don't have a headset or a microphone, they're thinking, oh, I need to be close to the inbuilt microphone in my laptop. I got to be there, otherwise, people won't hear me. But then, of course, it has the visual effect of bringing their face too close, and it's difficult to get their hands in. So those are my three top tips for virtual: camera on, get the physical setup right, and shoulder high gestures and good facial expressions to keep people connected visually, because we are primarily visual creatures and we need to be visually engaged.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. I always tell my people, put a post-it up there, hands up, because you're right.
Shoulder
You'll
high.
feel like they're up. And the catch 22 is, assuming we have more than six people on the call, we have to mute the audience. So
Mm.
I'll tell you something that's not a nonverbal, but you'll probably laugh at this, that I experimented with, and it almost worked. I actually would tell people, normally some people find me funny occasionally, so I won't be able to hear you. But if I say something that I think is funny, or I hear something that's funny, I'm going to hit this button. And I actually had a laugh box on another laptop with a Bose speaker on the other side of my mic, and I could go and put some laughter in, basically try and
Right,
create some
right.
audience noise. The problem, look good on paper, Martin. The problem
Mm.
was it's just a tick too long sometimes to get at that button. Because I can't sit there with my hand on the button. Occasionally, I'd miss it the first time. So it would sort of sound like, the chicken cross the road to get to the other side. It just took too long. But boy, it almost worked. That's all I can tell you. It almost worked. It's tough. That's the tough part. And we leave the world of nonverbal. The tough part for high energy presenters a lot of times is that muted audience. We feed off the sound of the audience a little bit. And so
Yeah.
all I can tell people is just watch the audience. You'll see them laughing. You'll see them thoughtful. And they'll give you what you're looking for. You're just going to have to pretend you can hear it. But watch their nonverbals. They'll give you what you're looking for. Last question before we let you go. If
Mm.
in terms of body language, if there was one lesson that you'd want people to master tomorrow, just one thing they should do differently, pay attention, or just try and perform, what would it be?
For me, the thing would be when we're looking to convince or influence or motivate somebody, most of the effort goes into what we're going to say. And I think the big takeaway is remember that content is king. What you've got to say is really, really important. But if it isn't backed up by something that visually that's going to assist that message, or if it's something that's going to detract from it, it doesn't matter how good your content is, you're much more likely to fail. And if the person you're competing against has thought about content and delivery, how they're going to put that across, they have a competitive advantage over you. So the best thing to do is when you're preparing like a pitch or a presentation, and none of us like doing it, is to rehearse it, record it on your camera. On even if you've only got a camera on your phones, put it up on a little stand, record yourself back, and get in the habit of not only checking that your content is good, but also that those visuals are really supporting that great content. I say it's almost like snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. You've built this fantastic content, but you haven't given any thought to how to visually support that, or just to make sure that your body language is aligned with that overall message. Do you look excited where they're supposed to be excited? Do you look concerned if you're saying this is the problem and we have the solution? Just that level of consistency, and watch it back. This is the big tip, as if you were an audience member. Watch yourself as if you were an audience member. Would you buy from this person? Would you be convinced by this person? Would you find a budget to go and do what this person is suggesting if it's an internal meeting? And just have that as part of the preparation. And that alone will just elevate the pitch or the presentation that you're likely to be doing, to make sure that your great content is supported by great body language and great vocal tones and great word choices. So you get the full package to convince, influence, and motivate people more effectively.
Beautiful. Perfect. How do people get a hold of you, Martin?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. Just go have a look on there. If you type in Martin Brooks body language on LinkedIn. You can find me through Amazon. If you were to purchase a body language decoder, you'll find me there, or my website, www.martinbrooks.me. A nice simple website address to be able to find me.
Perfect. And if we get a U.S. customer that comes knocking, you're coming over here, right?
I was in the U.S. last week. I was in Grand Rapids in Michigan last week.
All right. I was going to say, why didn't you cut? Well, I'm in DC. Okay, that's why. All right, Grand Rapids. So he'll come to the U.S. for you. Great. Well,
absolutely.
This is I met Martin probably 5 years ago, and we had a conversation on a podcast, and I enjoyed it. I am so glad we got to do this one because we really got to hone in on this from a presentation angle. I'm always grateful to hear from you and talk to you. Thanks so much for being on the show. It means a lot.
Oh, well, thank you not only for the invite, but also for putting together this resource for your audience. Fantastic to think about that and having that as a support. And this is the kind of thing that 30 years ago, I would have loved to have watched and picked up some tools and tips from all the wonderful guests that you're interviewing. So thank you for not only for myself, but also on behalf of your audience. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Well, folks, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.